Are you concerned about big tech monitoring your data? Many of you might be aware that your actions on the internet are under surveillance. Tech companies and government agencies use this data to build profiles on you that monitor your beliefs, relationships, and habits. A lot of this data is harvested from the apps on your computer. One of my fans has designed a desktop app called Synthetic Notes, which is a normal notes app with several key differences. Unlike most apps, it doesn't use a subscription model. That means once you've bought it once, it's yours forever. Compare that to other companies that charge you over $100 a year. Synthetic Notes also stores all of your data on your local machine, away from psychoanalytic algorithms and cloud databases. This, combined with the fact that it's not a subscription app, means that Synthetic Notes never needs to connect to the internet. You can safely quarantine the app and it will still work completely fine. By paying for Synthetic Notes, you are buying back your privacy. Go to syntheticapps.com/Zuby and use my code Zuby, Z-U-B-Y, at checkout to get 25% off. That's syntheticapps.com/Zuby and use my code Zuby at checkout for 25% off. Protect your privacy. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Now, on today's episode, we have got on somebody who is looking to disrupt and revolutionize the health insurance industry, and this is the CEO of CrowdHealth, Andy Schoonover. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No doubt, man. So I've done a brief intro right there, Andy, but for people who are not familiar with you, please tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'll give you a little background, a little context for the company and me. I was running a healthcare technology company a few years back and sold that company, and as such, lost my health insurance because, as you know, in the United States, most of these people get health insurance through our employers, and so I didn't have that anymore. So I went over to healthcare.gov and got a plan for me, my wife, and my two girls, and it was $1,200 a month. And it worked great until I actually had to use it. So my little one, who was 1 at the time, was having ear issues. So we went to the ear, nose, and throat doc, and he told us that she needed to get tubes in her ears. So we went over to the local hospital, got tubes in her ears. It was a 15-minute procedure, and the bill was $8,000.
Wow.
And I'm like, holy crap, $8,000 for 15 minutes. I mean, that's the craziness of our health insurance system, our healthcare system generally. And it was my first encounter with that. But I was like, okay, I have health insurance, and so health insurance is going to pay for it, right? Well, my health plan sent me a note that said it was medically unnecessary, and so we're not going to pay for it.
Wow.
And so I'm like, I had to stroke an $8,000 check to the local hospital, and it's it pissed me off, as you can probably imagine. So I called the plan. I said, man, I quit. If you're not going to pay my bills, I'm not going to pay your bills, right? Mm-hmm. And so over the last couple of years, I've started building some tools that allow people to operate outside of health insurance, and the culmination of that is CrowdHealth. We started back in April. We raised a $6 million seed round to start the company, and we're off to the races. So, yeah, CrowdHealth is just a way for people to ditch their existing health insurance. I like to say cancel health insurance or cancel culture today, and go off on your own and do it on your own, because most people don't have to have health insurance. So that's what we're doing.
No doubt. So how does CrowdHealth actually work?
Yeah, so you contribute funds to an account that's your account every month. So if you're between the ages of 6 and 54, it's $175 a month. You put that into your account, and that is an account that you can use to help other people when they have healthcare bills. So if the Schoonovers have a healthcare bill, I'm going to go to Zuby and I'm going to say, hey, would you help the Schoonovers with their healthcare bill this month? It's almost like crowdfunding your healthcare bills. And if you say yes, then you will transfer money from your account to my account to allow me to help pay for my daughter's broken arm. And so you just make a contribution every single month. If you have a healthcare bill, then you will contribute it to the community. We call it the crowd. And we ask the crowd to fund your healthcare bills. So in essence, what we're doing is we're taking the health insurance plan outside of the middle and just connecting you directly with other people in the community to help out with some of those big bills. So anything under $500, that's yours. You take care of it. It's like a car, right? Like you take care of your oil changes, but if there's something big, then you need some help with that. For things over $500, you can contribute to the community to get paid for. But here's the real kicker is by doing this, you'll save about 50%. If you ditch health insurance and you go with this option, you'll save about 50%. And that just shows how screwed up our health insurance system is there's 50% of waste the way that we're currently doing it in the United States.
I hear that. What is the way that health insurance currently works in the States? Because I'm from the UK, of course, so it's quite a different system because there's the NHS over there. You can, of course, still have private insurance as well, but the majority of people opt not to. But I know in the States, it's typically tied to people's jobs and workplaces. So I've got like a very vague understanding of it, but as someone who's got more expertise in the area, especially because this is going out to a global audience, can you kind of give us a rundown of how it typically works over there?
Yeah, sure. So 60% of the people in the United States get their insurance through their employer. So if you work for somebody, the employer will pay for your insurance or at least pay for part of it. They'll take out some part of it to pay for take it out of your check to pay for it. 30% of people will go and get it on their own because they are either entrepreneurs who don't work for a big company that pays for their insurance, or they don't have a job at all. So they're responsible for getting it on their own. And the remainder gets it through the government, whether it's Medicare for folks who are 65 and older, or it's Medicaid who are folks who are poor. So that's the way that there are really kind of three different ways of getting insurance: government, on your own, or through your employer. We're really focused on all those people who are trying to get it on their own, which are entrepreneurs, who are startups, who are freelancers, who are podcast folks, who are just trying to build a business, right, and aren't big enough to provide health insurance to everybody. So that's really where we're focused.
I get that. And what are the main problems? I mean, you've talked about wastage. I hear these horror stories in the States about, people getting these gigantic medical bills and stuff like that. So what are the issues in the current system?
Yeah, so people think that healthcare is really complex, and it's not. It is interesting because the buyers of healthcare, which are these health plans, actually are incentivized for prices to go up. So the Affordable Care Act, which was passed here in the United States about 8 or 9 years ago, says that health plans can only profit so much on your monthly premium. So if I pay $1,000 for the Schoonover house, the health plan can only profit $150, which from the outside looking in makes tons of sense. It's like, yeah, we don't want health plans to make way too much money on providing us that service. The problem with that, though, is if you're a corporation, you want your profits to go up. And so the only way for your profits to go up is for your premium to go up. So if you're at $1,000, you can make $150. If you're 10% higher than that, at $1,100, you make $165. So insurance plans actually have an incentive for prices to go up. So the hospital systems, who are the buyers, or the sellers of healthcare, also want prices to go up because they just want to make money, right? So if the buyers of healthcare and the sellers of healthcare both want prices to go up, guess what? Prices are going to go up, right? And so, our healthcare, I think we spend almost twice as much per capita on healthcare in the United States as kind of the average, country does. And so that's the reason why we have the buyers and the sellers of healthcare both wanting the prices to increase. And that's a major problem.
That's really interesting. So, of course, I love what you're doing because you're coming up with an innovative entrepreneurial solution towards this, which is much more community driven. Is this something that is as far as has anyone else tried this? Are there any other sort of crowdfunding type based ideas out there, or is this something that's totally new?
What I've done is I've kind of taken some of the other things that are working, like GoFundMe, for example. GoFundMe is a crowdfunding platform for everything, but it's I believe its number one request is for healthcare. And so I was like, okay, so can we take that and combine it with just modern day financial techniques to create something that is a viable alternative to health insurance? And that's what I've done. And there's really nothing out there, quite like it. But so far in 2021, we're in 2022 now, but in 2021, we got 100% of the bills that were submitted crowdfunded by the community. So it's working. We're getting prices that are about 50% less than what health insurance plans are getting. And the reason we can do that is we pay the doctors in cash. So, or a credit card. So if you can go in and pay a doctor via credit card, you're going to get about a 30 or 40% improvement in the price versus going through a health plan, because it's so difficult for the doctor to pay the health plan. So the great thing about this is doctors love it. And so if we can get the doctors to love it, the patients to love it, it's a system that's going to work.
So when it comes to people who are of different ages and health demographics, how is that handled in CrowdHealth? Is it just everybody pays the same amount, or does it change depending on your age and medical status?
Yeah, if you are so 6 and 54, it's $175. If you're younger than that, it's a little bit more. If you're older than that, it's a little bit more. The only reason there is babies are a lot more expensive than you and me. Folks over the age of 54, things start going wrong, so they're a little bit more expensive than the both of us, and so we ask them to put a little bit more into the pot.
Okay. And when someone has an issue and needs it funded, does that happen? It doesn't happen automatically. You said that it goes back out to the crowd, and then people need to agree or disagree. Is that right?
Yeah, and so if you're just going to the doctor, so here in the States, if you're going to a primary care doc or an OBGYN or a pediatrician, it's going to be between $150 and $200. And in that case, you'll pay for it. You'll submit it via our app, and then we'll go out and crowdfund it. And usually we're getting crowdfunded within 5 to 6 days. And then for the bigger ones, so let's just say a knee replacement. A knee replacement here in the States, a health plan will pay about $40,000. We're getting knee replacements for about $22,000 to $25,000. Same docs, just different payment structure. So, still super high quality, but that's usually scheduled. So we will actually go out and crowdfund that prior to you getting that knee replacement. So you let us know. You're like, hey, I'm going to go get a knee replacement. We say, great, you should go to this doc, and then we'll crowdfund that before you get there. So the doc actually gets paid on the day of the surgery.
Are there any limitations or exclusions? Can anybody join this?
Yeah, the only exclusions that we have are weight. So if you're over 300 pounds or smokers, so no smokers and obese, we're not going to allow you into the community, but everybody else is allowed into the community. And
Gotcha.
Again, that's just
okay. Well, I guess
those folks are massively more expensive than others.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's also, and for anyone who's interested in joining, I mean, that's also a pretty strong incentives to take care of certain lifestyle factors so that they can, I mean, obviously people should be doing this anyway, but as we all know, what people know they should do and what they actually do, especially when it comes to their health, is a tricky one. I don't think anyone's sort of mastered that one yet. I know someone who's really into health and fitness and diet and all of that, trying to work out the sort of silver magic bullet to encourage people and motivate them to actually take care of themselves properly. It's a very difficult one.
Well, given that we're kind of new and innovative, our average member right now is 34.
Okay.
So we have some young folks. The BMI is about 3 to 4 points lower than the national average. They're not smokers, they're not overweight, and so we've got a pretty healthy group. And so that should give people some comfort that they're in a group of people who are healthy. And so there shouldn't be, massive extravagant bills, because there are going to be some, but not, overly as a percentage of the entire community, because it's a pretty healthy community.
No doubt. It's going to be more, stuff that's rare, accidents,
Exactly.
Very unpredictable illnesses, things like that, rather than things that are just more chronic and avoidable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the other thing too here is people are like, okay, so what is the probability that my bills are actually going to get crowdfunded, right? The health plan will say that they'll guarantee that their bills will get paid, but here in the United States, like you just heard my story, one out of every 6 bills are rejected by the health plan. So 1 out of every 6. So imagine, that's not a very good probability, especially for, a really big bill. And I've been fortunate. I can pay an $8,000 bill to the local hospital, but 90% of people in this country can't do that. You just don't have $8,000 sitting around to pay a hospital bill. So here the sad stat is 250,000 people last year in the United States went bankrupt, even though they had health insurance, because of medical bills. 250,000 people.
Wow.
Right. That just tells you how stupid this system is. It's totally screwed up. And that's because health plans aren't paying these bills. And 2 is you have these big deductibles, which means, you have to pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 out of your pocket before the health plan will pay anything. Right. And a lot of people don't have $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000 in their bank. And so they're paying for something that they're not actually going to use, and it's going to put them into bankruptcy. And a lot of this stuff was dictated by the government. And so, of course, right, the government tries to fix something, and it actually makes it worse in many, many ways.
Happens a lot. It happens a lot. Given that the past 2 years supposedly have been so focused on health, I would argue that they haven't been, but given that that's supposed to be the narrative, have you taken any interesting insights away from that in terms of what it is that you are doing and what you're building? Because I think there have been so many fascinating insights on all sort of levels of humanity over this time for anyone who's analytical and observant. So is there anything that's come out of that for you?
Yeah, I think that we've got a renewed desire for a bit more self-sovereignty, especially in this country as the government tries to tell us what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And, in terms of the health insurance front, the government wants to tell us how to take care of our bodies, right? What the health insurance plans can pay for and can't pay for. And I think it should be between us and our doctors. Let us and our doctors decide what is good for us and what is not good for us, and then let people do what they want to do. And I think we're seeing that with this, pandemic, that the more the government tells us what we have to do with our bodies, the more people will rebel against it. And so I think CrowdHealth is always like, look, the responsibility is yours. You have a group of people who will help you in the case of a big bill, but we've been doing that for thousands of years, right? Like, our communities have rallied around us when we've had a big issue, whether it be healthcare or financial or whatever it is. And the government and the health insurance plans have now stuck themselves in between us and our communities. And that's where I think we've really gotten screwed up in this country. I can say for this country, I don't know, how the governments are acting in other countries. I'm seeing with this the Australian Open and all that kind of stuff going on in Australia, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people. So I think there's kind of a renewed spirit of desiring to keep the government out of people's health care. Man, we've been kind of overrun with folks, especially kind of libertarian-leaning folks who really want to own their own responsibility for healthcare. So we're seeing that in a big way, especially over the last 3 or 4 months.
Do you think this idea is unique to the USA because of the way the healthcare system currently is there and with all of its advantages and disadvantages? Or do you think that this concept is something that could work across different countries, whether that is one system that works across the board? For example, things like you brought up things like GoFundMe, Kickstarter, et cetera. These are obviously international platforms. Could something like CrowdHealth end up being international, or do you think it's something that is specific to the USA?
Yeah, so I think it could be international in two ways. One is we're getting a lot of people from Canada calling us,
Okay.
interestingly, because a lot of those folks come to the United States to get their health care paid for, because there's such long waits for Canadian health care. I saw something the other day where it was almost 6 months between primary care and a specialist. And so if they can come to the United States and have that covered, they will do that. So I do think that there is a Canadian impact to this. The other thing we're seeing too is U.S. citizens going abroad, and so that's one where it's like, look, I'm going to wherever, but I can't. My Cigna or Aetna or United Healthcare doesn't pay for my service in Turkey, for example. And so we do see a lot of interest from people who travel a lot, missionaries. We've got a bunch of missionaries on here, interestingly. And so yeah, I do think this could be international. Is it international in a big way? I don't know. I haven't done enough work on the kind of the regulatory environment of some of these other countries, but I mean, if countries want to bring the community back to healthcare, I think this is an interesting model. And if we can prove it out in the United States, then maybe it's something others will consider. Because we've got the best of both worlds. It is, you either got to choose the price or the wait times from what we've seen, right? The
Yes.
NHS and UK, the system in Canada, they are significantly lower cost, but your wait times are extremely long. The United States, our wait times are really low. Like I can walk into any specialist today if I want to, but that price is really high. What we're doing is we're saying, let's take the best of both worlds in that we can walk into a specialist today, we can pay them in cash, and as such, they're going to give us a price that's 30 or 40% less than what a health plan pays them. We're getting the best of both worlds with CrowdHealth. And if we can make that work and scale it, then I think it is a model in which other countries should look at and say, hey, this actually works. I know that's a grand, ambitious plan, but I think it's viable.
Yeah, well, I think all the best plans are grand and ambitious. I mean, I think it's a really, I really wanted to chat to you about this because I think it's such a cool idea. And as someone who is more libertarian minded, I'm very much interested in entrepreneurial and free market and community based solutions to things, because as we've already both acknowledged, we live in this era where people look to the government for everything. And as we know, due to incompetence, malice, and also just inefficiency, there are a lot of things that the government is not going to do as well as the free market could do. And there's always going to be wastage. The incentive structure is not set up correctly. There's a whole host of problems with it. Plus, also, I also like the community idea. I think one great thing about crowdfunding in general, whether this is people funding something through GoFundMe or using Indiegogo or Kickstarter for a project. I've used Kickstarter for 3 of my music projects, for example. And building that community is also really valuable. Because one thing is when something comes from the government, which really is coming from taxpayer money, there's this idea that money is kind of coming from nowhere, right? There's this entitlement that people just feel, I just get this money from nowhere, and you're not realizing that that's coming from someone else's labor or someone else's contribution or anything like this. But when it's much closer to you with something like crowdfunding, you can see and be thankful for and be grateful for the people who are part of that community. You can actually see who's there. Okay, great. Like, these are the people who contributed. These are the people who helped. And then also in the future, when it comes time for you to pay that back and to help somebody else, it also feels better. It's not just like, okay, my money is being
Totally
extorted from me and I don't know where it's going. I don't know who it's going to. I don't know what it's doing. I don't know if the person receiving it appreciates it or cares or whatever. They just feel entitled to it. So I think ideas like this are really the way forward. And I think it's also interesting because it's simultaneously like a very old and a very new idea, crowdfunding in general. Like, I think if you were to go way, way, way back in time, it's like, actually, this is how human beings have typically done things, just on a community level. And then things got so big and governments got so big. And then I think we're moving away again towards more decentralization. We're seeing this happening in the financial system. We've seen it happen in other things. And I think healthcare is an area where it's kind of ripe for innovation. I think healthcare and education are two massive areas where there's just so much room for change and improvement. We've kind of been running with these old models for like a very, very long time, and I don't think they're serving people particularly well.
Yeah, amen. I mean, I think, look, the government has stolen the value of generosity from most of us. If you see somebody on the side of the street that needs help, right? The thought at least goes through my mind. I'll be honest, is like, hey, the government's going to help them, right? And that because we've got this system built that is an entitlement based system, and so instead of me going and help that person, I make an assumption, and I think I'm not the only one. I think it's the vast majority of the people say
agree.
The government is going to help them. Yay, government. But that keeps the responsibility away from me and pushes it on to somebody else. Where if we as a community can say, no, we're going to gather around that person, and we, out of our own pockets, as opposed to the government, which is our own pockets ultimately, but like, how can we, out of our own pockets, go and support that community, that family, that person, whatever it may be? But the government has stolen that from us. The ability to be generous in many, many ways, you know, and I think the lack of generosity, which I think is a soul-filling characteristic, a soul-filling activity, really is one of the key components of the decline of our society, from my perspective. So, and I think healthcare is the same way. The health insurance plan has gotten in the middle of something, whereas we as a community in the past have been responsible for the other people in our community to make sure that they're safe and they're healthy and those types of things. And so we're bringing that back and have some pretty kind of cool tools in the background to allow people to do that effectively. So it's kind of back to the future, right? I mean, it's like taking things that worked 2,000 years ago, adding fintech onto it to really create something that is viable and I think long lasting. So if your listeners out there are fed up with health insurance, they're here in the United States, fed up with health insurance, we'd love for them to join us.
No doubt, man. So I'm curious to shift gears a little bit and find out more about the man behind the project. So you said that prior to CrowdHealth, you ran and sold another business. What was that?
Yeah, funny enough, it was also in healthcare.
Okay.
So we were monitoring blood pressure and blood sugars and weight and things like that out of the home of folks with chronic conditions. So if you had diabetes, we would know if your blood sugar would spike. And so we would call you and we'd say, hey, Mr. Smith, your blood sugar is up. What's going on? Did you not take your meds? Did you have a meal that you weren't, supposed to be having and things like that? And so we were helping people with chronic conditions to stay out of the hospital. And funny enough, we were selling that to health plans.
Okay.
And so, I've made money on health plans in the past. I'm going after them now. So it's kind of a funny thing.
No doubt. And what about the story behind that? Because with all my guests, I'm always interested in finding out a little bit about the person, not just what they do.
Yeah, sure.
But
Man, that's good.
the story.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so I went to Stanford for business school. Out of Stanford, funny enough, I don't know. Have you ever seen The Social Network, the movie about Zuckerberg?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So there's a subplot in that movie around Eduardo having to go to his dad to get, I think it was $16,000 or $18,000 to pay for this house that Zuckerberg needed to get all of his buddies from Boston to Silicon Valley. Well, that house that they rented was my house. They actually rented it from me.
Okay.
And so, in the movie they have this, these funny things about zip lines from the chimney into the pool and things like that. That they didn't actually have a zip line. There was a pool at this house, but it was like the worst financial decision I've ever made is not taking equity as opposed to that cash.
Oh, wow.
Because this was back in 2000, and I might screw up the 2005, I think 2005. So this is when they were tiny. They had 6 or 7 colleges. You had to have a .edu email address to be a part of Facebook, and we were like, okay, this is a niche little thing, for college students.
I'm guessing this was probably around 2004, actually, because
maybe it's 2004.
I think I joined Facebook in 2004, and that was around that stage, the way you just described it.
Yeah, so I think it was maybe summer of '04, if that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, it was kind of a funny story, but I was out of business school, and there was that time where all my buddies were going to Google and Facebook and all these high tech companies, and I was like, I want to do something a little bit different. So I went out and raised some money to buy this little company in of all places, Dayton, Ohio. For your visitors who are overseas, this is a little place in the middle of the country that nobody ever talks about. But so I moved from San Francisco to this little Midwest town, and had a couple dozen employees, and over 7 years turned it into 300 or 400 employees. And sold it to a private equity firm, which has now given me and my family the ability to go and do some other things, like try to take down health insurance. So that's a quick history.
Okay, no, that's awesome, man. Yeah. So coming back to what you're working on, what are the plans for 2022?
Yeah, so we're 2021, at the end of the year, was open enrollment. So in the United States, we have this period of about 2 months where you can sign up for health insurance. We don't have an open enrollment with Join CrowdHealth. You can join us anytime you want to. But 2022 is really focused on scaling up the organization, building some cool tech functions. One of the things we're going to do is allow people to have significantly reduced costs if they work out. So we're going to be able to tie your Apple Watch or other wearable into our app, so that if you work out, at least 3 times a week, then you'll get a significant reduction of the amount you have to pay on a monthly basis to, again, really incentivize people to, one, get working out, but also incentivize people who work out to come and join us, because we love that. We love that crew. So we're building lots of tech here over the next 12 months to make the experience for the end user even more affordable than it currently is, but also just way easier to use. So those are the things we have for 2022. It's going to be a fun year. We're trying to get to about 25,000 people by the end of the year, and we're well on our way.
That's awesome, man. No, I think this is such a dope idea. I do hope that it ends up being something that can be international, because even as myself, as somebody who's like a who just travels around so much and is out and about different cities, different countries, all that, I think it would be so cool to have something where it's like, okay, cool, I can just set up my contribution there, and it's community based, and I can help support other people with that. They can help support me. It's outside of this old school legacy system. I just think it's a brilliant idea, honestly.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we if we can get up to that 20,000 people mark, I think it's really got significant legs. And so, like I said, we're well on our way there. And I was like, man, if everybody who listened to this podcast would sign up, we'd be there, and you'd be like, no, clearly, I mean, instrumental in really changing the way that healthcare is done.
Yeah.
I think we truly have something here that if we can get to the a couple 20,000, 25,000, we'll be legitimate alternative to the way that healthcare is being currently delivered, and we'd love people to be a part of that.
Absolutely. Are there any threats to it from the legacy system?
I mean, look,
or anything you foresee?
Yeah, our 2 biggest health plans in the United States are 2 of the biggest. United Healthcare is the biggest, and they are the 8th largest company in the world based on revenue. Aetna is owned by a company called CVS here in the United States. They are the seventh largest company in the world. So
CVS, like the pharmacy?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so we have the seventh and the eighth largest companies in the world not liking what we're doing. And so, so our biggest hurdle is a big corporation, right? Who pay the lobbyists lots of money to tell legislators in our country that this is a bad idea. And so that's really our biggest hurdle is big corporations kind of getting in the middle of this. And so we're just trying to, grow as fast as we can. And all of these big technological innovations over the last decade have had regulatory issues. I mean, if you think back with Uber, right? Uber had on a local level, even here in Austin, we outlawed them for, I think, a year. And Tesla has some regulatory problems too. And so all of these that are trying to disrupt the way that we've done things in the past, there's a lot of legacy people hanging on because they're getting their bills paid by these legacy systems. And they'll try to impact it in a whole lot of ways, despite the fact that, we will show that this is a much more effective, way to go. So we will have some regulatory hurdles for sure.
Sure. And what's the feedback been like in general from either people who have heard about it or, more importantly, the people who are currently using it?
Man, incredibly positive, incredibly positive. We had a woman 6 or 8 weeks ago who had a brain hemorrhage. She was 38. She was 110 pounds. Just a crazy, whack accident, brain hemorrhage. We called her every day to see how she was doing. We sent her flowers. And she came out of that and she's like, I felt so loved by you all that it really helped me, I think, in my recovery. She spent, I think, 7 or 8 days in neuro ICU. Like, it was bad. And the fact that we were calling her and somebody was there really caring about her, I think just is a perfect example of like how many people feel like their health insurance plan or the NHS or whatever the equivalent is in your country feels, the people feel loved by that entity. I think we really are taking a different approach here where we treat them like our community members. And so the feedback has just been, extraordinary. So we just had somebody over the weekend who's got a baby with COVID and he took them to the ER. We told them that she shouldn't do that, but they did it anyway. But, the fact that we were communicating with them on a Sunday about their 10-month-old who had COVID, he's like, wow, you guys are actually talking to me on a Sunday. Like, that's incredible. Yeah. And we're like, yeah, because we care about you. And so there is a genuine care for our members that I think people feel loved, which is, we're totally customer first. And so I think that's really important.
That's awesome, man. Well, I hope this thing continues to grow. And I hope that attitude and care is truly something that can scale, because I think that there's just so many organizations and entities and companies and out there which, they get to a certain stage or certain level and that just gets lost. Things just become numbers and data points, and the human beings and the humanity gets lost amongst it all. And I think that that's a big problem that we're having across our societies. I think, everything just becomes numbers and data and statistics and all of that. And even in this age of the internet, it can be quite easy to forget that, okay, there's people on the other end of these things. These are individual people with concerns and families and friends, and people care about them. It's not just numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's us loving our customers is a key component of our scale. Not only does it scale, it's a key component of us scaling, right? We're going to get most of our new members from people who are current members who are saying, this is awesome, right? And so we have every incentive in the world to make sure our customers feel loved. So they go and tell their family and their friends and all these other people to say, hey, you need to do something. This is different, and you need to try it out, right? And that person has a personal care advocate on our team that will talk to them. And so you talk to the same person every single time you call us. It's not call centers, it's not call centers in foreign countries where you can barely understand them. It's the same person every single time you call. And that's really important. I think that's a really important component of what we do, especially if you want to feel cared for. you can't be cared for if you have to tell 5 people the same story every time you call in, right? I mean, that's just not the type of culture that we're building. And I think, financially it scales, and I think it scales even better when you think about, if people love us and love what we're doing, they're going to tell lots of friends, and that's our biggest expense right now is marketing, right?
Absolutely.
So if you tell a friend, it costs us nothing, and that allows us to scale some of the customer experience components that we think is really important to our business.
That's awesome, man. Andy, where can people find out more about you and the company?
Yeah, go to joincrowdhealth.com. If you use the promo code Zuby, you will get 3 months at $99, which is about half price. So we'd love for you to try us out. And so, go to Join CrowdHealth. We're also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and so go and see us there as well. Our handle on all of those.
What's the handle? Oh, sorry, you were saying.
Join CrowdHealth.
Join CrowdHealth.
Yep.
Awesome. No doubt. Is there a particular platform you want people to follow you on? Which one's most active?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook is our most active, and Instagram is our second most active. So different audiences for those two types of platforms, but either one of those are good. But follow us on Twitter. We love to get more conversation going on Twitter as well. It's always lively when it's on Twitter, so we like it.
A little bit too lively. Nice one, Andy. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really, really love what you're doing, and thank you for the discount code for listeners as well. That's awesome. And I'll put the links in the description.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.